Hello. We're learning Tractate Shabbos, page 123, chapter 17. The name of the chapter is called Hakelim. So we said yesterday that you allowed to take a blacksmith hammer on Shabbos to crack open nuts with it. That was the statement of Rabbah. Kunas shel napochim lefatzeh boy ha'egoizim. Kunas shel napochim is the hammer, the blacksmith hammer to crack open nuts with it. Kasovar, Rabbah holds. Morning, David. Rabbah holds Dovo shemelachta leisu letzerich guf umuto. Something that is ordinarily used primarily for work, like the blacksmith hammer, is forbidden on Shabbos. But letzerich gufoy muto may be taken for the sake of its use in a permissible capacity.
Which gets to the doorstop marshal.
What does it mean for the sake of its
permissible capacity?
what does it mean for the sake of its use? If you look at number 1, it says, however, Rabbah holds that this type of utensil may not be moved for the sake of its place. And if you need a place of the hammer, according to Rabbah, it should not be moved. But if you need its use to crack the nut, then you're allowed to.
All right.
So Abai challenged Rabbah, medoicho, a mortar, in which garlic is usually crushed. Yeah, that's almost like a grinder,
Right.
but a mortar, I think, it's like a little ball, and you put the garlic inside, and you crush it. People use it for crushing spices.
The pharmacists used to do it back in the day.
To turn it into a dust, right? So today the capsules are inside the powder is inside the capsule, so you can open the capsule and pour the. But so garlic usually crushed in this medoicho, in this mortar. If it contains garlic, it may be moved on the Shabbos. But if not, it may not be moved even for the sake of permissible function. We see that a utensil, which is used primarily for prohibited work, may not be moved for the sake of its use. So similarly, a challenge to Rabbah that said that you're allowed to use the blacksmith hammer to crack a nut. Amole Amani, whose opinion is reflected in the Vice of Nechemeh, the opinion of Nechemeh, the Amar ein klinita le'letzich tashmisha. So the utensil may not be taken on the Shabbos only for the sake of its designated function. What does it mean? Utensil may be taken. Who said the utensil may be taken on Shabbos only for the sake of its designated function? It says, number 3, Rabbi Nechemiah's opinion is set forth below. He holds that even a utensil that is designated for a permitted use may be moved only for its designated purpose. To use it for what it's designated for, not for other use. Like scissors are designated to cut; they're not designated to open screws with it, right?
You're not allowed to use scissors on Shabbos.
I know. I'm just giving an example of something that has a very specific use. Certain things have multiple usages, like knives.
Yeah. Right.
You can use it for peeling, you can use it for cutting, you can use it for...
the thing of locks, so you couldn't figure out how to open it on Shabbos because I was going to look for shalashudis.
According to Rabbi Nehemiah, utensil may be taken only on Shabbos, only for the sake of its designated function. Obviously, if it's permissible function. ACV Abaye issues another challenge. Challenge Rabbah on the basis of the following brisa. One may not take a pestle on Yom Tov to chop meat upon it.
Ah. Okay, let's go on with this.
Uvei Hillel matiri. Beis Hillel say you're allowed to. Pestle is probably like a meat.
Pestle, no, pestle's at the top of the mortar. The mortar.
Right.
It's a
The actual stick.
and it goes like this.
Right.
Right. And,
So he says you are not allowed to. One may not take a pestle on Yom Tov to chop meat with it, or to chop meat upon it. Uveisil matirim. Veisil say you're allowed to. Veshovin, and they agree. Veisil and Beis Shammai she'im kitzev olav basel she'osu l'tatel, that if one has already chopped meat on the pestle, he may not move it afterwards for another purpose.
move the pestle.
Right.
Okay.
We see that something which is ordinarily used for prohibited work may not be moved for the sake of its use in a permissible capacity. So how can you tell me, Rabbah, that I'm allowed to use the blacksmith hammer to crack nuts on Shabbos? It's something which is ordinarily used for prohibited work. Rabbah initially intended to answer Abaye. This price also accords with the opinion of Rabbi Nehemiah. Rabbi Nehemiah. Kevan the Shomer Lo Damar Bichin Avashimia Mishmei Derav. Once he heard that which Rabbi Avashimia said in the name of Rav, Ha Kol Meidim V'Sikei Ziyore Umazue. All agree concerning
Spindles, clothes,
spindle,
and mallets.
clothes presses and mallets, that they may not be moved at all on the Shabbos. Why? The Chevan the Kopi the Layu, because since their owner is particular about them, out of concern that they might be ruined, Miyachadlu Mokim. He designated a place for storing them and sets them aside for Shabbos use. Rabbah said that this with regard to these utensils too, a mortar and pestle, we may say that the owner designates a place for storing them and sets them aside for the Shabbos use. Therefore, all agree that they may not be moved on the Shabbos. So this is another concept in Shabbos of what we just mentioned, Kevan the copy the life, since the owner is particular about them. And this also applies to obviously expensive items, that people are very careful with them and they have an exclusive designated place for them, that they should not be moved on Shabbos. The Gemara cites further opinions concerning which type of hammer our Mishnah permits using to crack open nuts. Rabbi Barabba said in the name of Yochanan, Kurna shel Zahavim Shaninu. We learned in our Mishnah's ruling in regard to a goldsmith hammer. Rav Shemen Barabba said, Kurna shel Besam Shani. We learned it in regard to a spice maker's hammer. So we have a goldsmith hammer, a blacksmith hammer, and besomim, which is spice maker's hammer. One who said that the ruling pertains to a spice maker's hammer holds kol sheken dezavim. Certainly pertains to goldsmith hammer as well. And the one who said that it pertains to a goldsmith hammer meant specifically this type of hammer. Aval, but as for a spice maker's hammer, he holds that the owner is particular about it and sets it aside for Shabbos use, from Shabbos use. He sets it aside, he puts it away,
He
doesn't use it
Shabbos.
on Shabbos, from Shabbos
Now,
use, making sure.
I don't know, my perception of a goldsmith's hammer is it's kind of a light hammer that you just bang out. And,
Right. The question is, you're allowed to. I mean, there's two things. Number one is could be that there's certain stages where the goldsmith needs to use a bigger hammer. Number one, maybe he gets a block of gold and works with a big piece of gold, and to crack a nut, you don't need very much. So what's the
walnut is you need a little bit more for a walnut than you do for something else.
Right.
I don't know. But a spice maker's hammer, okay, you wouldn't use it for Shabbos, but then I don't know about Yom Tov, but all right. What's 11? Lest it become repugnant.
So it will be unsalvageable.
It must not be a metal. It must be
Right.
Like wood.
Because it seems like he would be more careful with the spice hammer than with the goldsmith hammer.
Right, because it could suck up the smell and then permanently it would be a mess.
So the Mishnah says, "V'esakush v'esakarka." A spindle or weaver's reed, spear fruit with it. To spear fruit with it. They stick it into a fruit, and that's how they get the fruit. It's like almost like a sword, but just the point ahead and stick things into it. Some use it for spear fishing. Some use it to spear into a fish. Tanu Rabban Pagosh Tomnu b7, an unripe fig that was burnt in straw before the Shabbos. It was buried in straw before the Shabbos. So it's unripe, but they do it to ripen it. And a cake that had been buried in coals before the Shabbos. If part of the fig or cake is exposed, it may be moved on the Shabbos. But if not, it may not be moved. Rabbi Menashe Amitay says, even if it is not exposed, one may spear it with a spindle or a weaver's reed and lift it. And the straw or coals will fill off by themselves. That what?
16.
That one may spear it with a spindle or weaver's reed and lift it.
15.
So it's like we have a concern when you have cake inside figs, inside the coals, that if you would take out the cake on Shabbos, you would stir the coals, right? You stir them, and then they will create fire. But according to Rabbi Menashe Amitay, he says that you're allowed to do it with a spear.
How about a potato? Let's say you're doing baked potatoes. So you put before Shabbos, you put the potato in the coals, and then you can.
And even if it's not exposed, meaning that you do have to go through the
with the stick.
Right. It's like precision target. You got to go through exactly there.
To get the what you want out of the fruit.
Lift it, and the straw or coals will fall off by themselves. We have to see if they're dealing with live coals. Let's see 15. Rabbi Menashe Amitay holds that as long as one does not move the muktzah directly, with his hand or implement, he may lift the buried object out of its encasement.
Yeah.
Although the muktzah covering will be lifted somewhat by the raising object before it falls off, and will thus be moved indirectly. Rabbi Elazar ben Tadai permits the lifting. This type of lifting he permits.
But if you have
that's like the shinui type. You do it indirect.
Right. But if you have it all covered, the food thing all covered, and you're putting going in with the needle, you could kind of move the coals to get to it. Then you're doing muktzah. So somehow you have to be able to go straight without touching the stuff, and then pull it up. And then if it's okay, the stuff gets moved.
Let's see. The main was the Sova of Nachman, tiltu minatzad, lo ishmei tiltu. So according to Rav Nachman, moving something indirectly is not considered moving it. Moving indirectly is not deemed moving with respect to muktzah, and it is and is therefore permitted. Amar Rav Nachman, I pugla, concerning a radish that had been plucked and was then buried in the ground to ripen, but is partially exposed. If it is laying right side up, it is permitted to grasp the exposed part and lift it out of the ground. But if it is laying upside down, it is forbidden to lift it. We see that Rav Nachman forbids the indirect movement of muktzah. It says in 16, since the radish had previously been plucked, the melacha of harvesting is not applicable. And the only issue of moving the muktzah earth indirectly. Now the top of a radish is wider than its bottom. Therefore if the radish was buried right side up and its top is exposed, one can grasp the wide and lift the narrower bottom from the hole without any movement of earth. However, if it was buried upside down with only the narrow bottom exposed, one who lifts it will automatically lift some earth that is resting on the wider top. Although this would merely constitute indirect movement of the earth, for the person would not be touching the earth. Okay. But it says, Gemara answers, Hodar bei Rav Nachman, Rav Nachman retracted that ruling concerning a buried radish. It says in 17, the Gemara asserts that he retracted the ruling regarding radish because Gemara asserts that he retracted the ruling regarding the radish rather than the other one because the halacha actually permits the indirect movement of muktzah for the sake of non-muktzah object.
So therefore, even if the radish is upside down, you could pull it out with the stick.
Right. A hand needle to remove a splinter with it. A needle and try to get it out of the splinter.
Right.
Sholach li Rabba Brei de Rabba Rav Yosef. Rabba, the son of Rabba, sent the following inquiry to Rav Yosef. Yelamdeinu Rabbeinu. Let our master teach us. What the law is concerning a sewing needle. Sewing needle. Whose eye or point was removed. Does it lose its status as a utensil and become muktzah? Amarlei Tanisua, we learned it in our Mishnah, which states, one may take a hand needle a sewing needle to remove a splinter with it, what difference is it? What difference is there to the splinter between a needle that has an eye and one that doesn't have an eye? The needle that has an eye is for sewing. The needle doesn't have an eye; it's not for sewing.
So
the splinter itself doesn't care how to take it out.
Right.
Since the Mishnah considers the removal of a splinter a valid use for a sewing needle, and the needle is fit for this task, even after its eye is removed, it retains its status as a utensil and is not a
How are you going
muktzah.
to take the eye out of the needle like this? I don't understand the point of
Let's
this.
see 18. Rav Yosef does not address the issue of a needle whose point broke off. However, his response implies somewhat that in such a case, the needle is muktzah, since there is a difference in regard to the removal of a splinter between a needle
That
has a point and one that has no point.
But this is the opposite question.
But regarding the eye, it doesn't make a difference whether it has an eye or doesn't have an eye. It's still a utensil.
You're going to tell me the point is at the bottom.
No, but you have the point and the eye is on the other side.
Exactly.
So if the point is not there, it's not a utensil, then it's a muktzah, because you can't get the splinter out without the point. You need the point.
It's a waste of time to have it.
Right, it's not a utensil, it's a muktzah.
Then why would you even bother touching it?
But if it has an eye or doesn't have an eye, it's not relevant, because
True.
in both cases, I can still use it for taking out the splinter.
Right.
So we're going to 123a3. Esivei Rava, the son of Rabba, challenge of Yosef on the basis of the following Mishnah: a needle whose eye or point has been removed is toher, is not susceptible to tumah because it is not classified as a utensil. We see that the removal of a needle's eye nullifies its status as a utensil, so then it should be muktzah, should not be able to use it. Would you attempt to contrast the laws of Tumah with the laws of Shabbos? What's the connection between the two? This is not a valid comparison, for these laws are subject to different criteria. Tumah kili masabina. Tumah, for an item to be susceptible to Tumah, we require that it be a fashioned vessel. And once the eye or point of a needle is removed, it does not fit into this category.
It couldn't be kabel tumah.
Ma'aseh ba'inyan.
It's a joke.
Le'inyan Shabbos mi'dechazi ba'inyan. Concerning the matter of the Shabbos, however, for classification as a non-muktzah, we require only something that is fit for use.
It's the opposite.
And this needle whose eye was removed is still fit for use in the removal of a splinter.
So then you could say kabel tumah.
So for Tumah, it's no, because it says for Tumah, klei ma'aseh ba'inyan, a fashioned vessel.
Yeah.
And once the eye is removed, it's not good anymore for what it was designated for. You're not making needles to get splinters out. You can also use it to get splinters out.
But that's a secondary.
Right. It's like you make cars to drive them, not to rob the bank. But you can also use the car to rob the bank.
Right.
But that's not its main
Especially
use.
with a mask.
Saying it's not. It's a forbidden use of the car.
I'll leave that for later.
The one who challenged Rav Yosef on the basis of the law of Tumah, challenged him properly. since concerning the matter of Tumah, the needle whose eye was removed is not considered a utensil. The Inyan Shabbos nami lav monohu, so to concerning the matter of the Shabbos is not considered a utensil. Meiti v'machad b'nikuv and shenikuva. They challenge Rava on the basis of the following vice: whether a needle is pierced, meaning it has an eye, or it is not pierced, or it doesn't have an eye, muto letaltalo b'Shabbos, it may be moved on the Shabbos. And they said that being pierced makes a difference in the needle's classification only concerning the matter of Tumah. We see that when a needle's eye is removed, it retains its classification as a utensil in regard to muktzah, even though it is no longer considered a utensil in regard to Tumah.
Okay.
Tirgema Abaya Aliba de Rava. Abaya explained the Braita according to the opinion of Rava as follows: Begol me'askinan, we are dealing with unfinished needles. Unfinished needles. Although these are not yet considered utensils in regard to Tumah, they are deemed non-muktzah. Zimni demim lachalayu mashvelu mano, because sometimes one reconsiders his plans for them, and instead of piercing them, he designates them in their current form as a tool for removing splinters. However, where there was a finished needle and its eye or point was removed, a person discards it among his metal scraps. Therefore, it loses its designation as a utensil and becomes muktzah. The Gemara disagrees or digresses to an unrelated discussion in which one of the disputants cites our Mishnah in support of his opinion. Asur v'yanuka, straightening out the limbs of an infant on the Shabbos. Some of the babies, the infant, they stretch them out a little bit. So Rav Nachman said not to do it. Rav Sheshes shori. Rav Sheshes would permit it. It's talking about infant whose limbs were dislocated during birth and need straightening, repositioning, or realigning. Rav Nachman forbids doing this on the Shabbos because repairing a human being is similar to repairing a utensil, which is prohibited biblically. It's like the melacha of a makir patish, the final blow.
I know, but Rav Sheshes,
there is no prohibition against repairing a human being when no medicinal remedy is employed. Medical remedies are forbidden in non-critical situation by rabbinical decree, lest one grind herbs to make medicine. Obviously, the discussion pertains to a case where there's no critical need to straighten out the limbs immediately. It could wait. Otherwise, all would agree that it is permitted.
Okay.
So Rav Nachman Osir, Rav Sheshes Shor. Rav Nachman says it's forbidden. Rav Sheshes says it's permissible. Rav Nachman, where do I learn this? Where do I learn to say this? That nan, for we learned in a Mishnah in Oisin apiktoizin v'Shabbos. You should not make apiktizin and emetic on the Shabbos. What's this emetic?
It makes you
What is
throw up
emetic?
because it's like for get rid. Let's say, God forbid, well, if you have poison, you do whatever you have to.
Makes you get rid of poison.
Right.
Okay.
Two. Look at two.
It is forbidden to induce vomiting by ingesting an emetic.
An emetic, right.
Yeah, an emetic. This pertains to the inducement of vomiting, not for purpose of health, but for the sake of emptying the digestive tract to enable oneself to continue eating and drinking. Since this is not done for one's health, the basis of the prohibition cannot be the rule against medicinal remedies. Like I heard this thing that people go to restaurants and they eat, and then they
go in. They have it's a disease, and I can't like an anorexics do it. Okay, I know there was a singing group, and this woman Karen Carpenter, she was a nice singer, but she was anorexic, so she would go and do this to the point where she made herself so sick she died. All right, whatever. The Romans did it a lot.
No, so he says, I deduce from this that just as it is forbidden to repair one's body by making an emetic, so too it is forbidden to repair an infant by straightening its limbs.
Okay.
Rav Sheshes retorts, Rav Sheshes says, Hosam lav orche, there the emetic is not part of the person's normal condition, or normal conditioning. Whereas here, straightening the limbs is part of the infant's normal conditioning. Rav Sheshes now cites a source for his opinion. Rav Sheshes menam minala. From where do I learn to say this? That nan, for we learned in our Mishnah, machat shel yad litel boisakotz. One may take a hand needle to remove a splinter with it. We see that there is no prohibition against repairing a human being where no medicinal remedy is employed. Rav Nachman retorts, Hosom Pekid. There, the splinter is an extraneous object.
Extraneous.
There, the splinter is an extraneous object that is merely embedded in the skin.
Right.
Therefore, its removal is not considered a repair. Here, however, the limbs are not merely embedded, but are actually attached to the body. Relocating them properly in their sockets is similar to repairing a utensil and is therefore prohibited.
That's why from chiropractor won't adjust you on Shabbos.
A cane for turning olives. After olives were harvested, it says in number 4, they were stored in a vat to soften until ready for pressing. A cane was used to turn over the olives in the vat to examine them for readiness. Okay. If there is a knot at its end, it is susceptible to tumah. Ve'im lav ein mekabel tumah. But if not, it is not susceptible to tumah. Venkach uvenkach nitel v'Shabbos. In either case, it may be taken on the Shabbos. The Gemara analyzes the ruling that a cane with a knot at its end is susceptible to tumah amai. Pshute eitz. Pshute chli eitz hu. The cane is a flat wooden utensil, one that has no receptacle. Pshute chli eitz einon mekablim tumah. And flat wooden utensils are not susceptible to tumah. My time. What is the reason that they are not susceptible to tumah? Dumya desak bein. It is required that a wooden utensil be analogs to
analogous
to a sack in order to be susceptible to tumah. Why then is the cane susceptible to tumah? The Gemara cites an answer, Tana Mishmei de Rabbi Nechemia, B'shor she'me'apech b'zeisim oifchoi v'royei boy. When one turns over olives with a cane, he inverts it and looks at the end to examine the oil that remains in the cavity formed by the knot. So the cavity is used as a receptacle for oil. So in this case, it was a utensil because it had the. Why is the cane susceptible to tumah? So it tells us when one turns over the olives, he had some kind of a cavity in there that he was able to see.
The cavities it uses a
for oil.
So it has a little oil and you can look at it. So then you know, I guess, if the oil is good.
He says the knot in 8, he says the knot is slightly indented at the end of the cane, forming a small cavity. When the cane is inserted in the vat to turn over the olives, some oil then oozes from the olives, adheres to it, and gathers in the cavity and its end. The oil presser then examines it to better determine whether the olives are ready for pressing. Let's see. Rabbi Yossi Omer, another Mishnah, all utensils may be taken on the Shabbos, except for a large saw and a coulter. It's a sewing machine. Macharesho is it's the utensil made for sewing. See, in 9 it says a large saw is one that is used to cut through beams. A coulter is a large knife-like part of a plow that cuts into the ground to make furrows. For plowing, so we have all the utensils may be taken on Shabbos except these two guys, Masar Agodol v'Yosef Machresha, large saw and a coulter. The Gemara lists other utensils that are subject to the Mishnah's rule. Amar Rav Nachman, Ai Uchla the Kotzer Kiyosef Shel Machresha Damim. The launderer's riddle is similar to a coulter and is therefore totally muktzah. Amar Rabbi Charbo de Ushkofi, a tanner's knife. A tanner, a guy that tans hides. Vesakino de Ashkavto, a butcher's knife. Vechatzino de Nogre, and a carpenter's adze. Vekiyosid shel machresha dam, are similar to a coulter and therefore should be muktzah and are muktzah. Tana Rabbono, the rabbis taught in the Baisa, originally they said that only 3 utensils may be taken on Shabbos. Maktsua shel devela, the knife used for cutting a cake of pressed figs. Vezuhamo shel istron shel kedero, the ladle used for skimming foam of a pot. Vesakin ketano shel gabe shulchan, and a small table knife. Later, they permitted movement of additional utensils. They further permitted, and Achamu, and then they became more lenient, and they said, all utensils may be taken on Shabbos, chutz min masor hagodol v'yoset shel machresha, except for a large saw and a coulter. Moses, "Mai tiru v'chozu v'tiru v'chozu v'tiru." What does it mean? They permitted, they further permitted, and then they further permitted, etc. They permitted taking something that is used primarily for permitted work for the sake of its use,
but not in its place.
Yeah. V'chozu v'tiru, and they further permitted dovo shemalachta leter l'tzoch mukayim, something that is used primarily for permitted work for the sake of its place. Chozu v'tiru, they further permitted dovo shemalachta le'isu, something that is used primarily for prohibited work. Letzorech gufoi ein. For the sake of its use, like the blacksmith hammer, they said it's okay, but not for the sake of its place. But don't move it because you need the place. The utensil, it says in 15, that is used on a weekday primarily for work that is forbidden on Shabbos, may be taken for the sake of using it for a task that is permitted on the Shabbos, taking a blacksmith hammer to crack open nuts, but not for the sake of making its place available.